Derecognition of financial asset. An entity derecognizes financial asset when contractual right to receive cash from financial asset expires, plus the entity transfer or sell the financial asset, and transfer qualifies for derecognition, means risk and reward is transferred. Examples of entity has transferred substantially all the risk and reward. In this case, I will be discussing some of the points, and then if these points are met, then financial assets should be derecognized and gain and loss should also be recognized. The first is unconditional sale of financial asset. Like normal, we don't attach any condition to the sale of financial asset. Second, the sale of financial asset with the option to repurchase at a fair value at that time, means variable price, and means you are going to you have an option to buy the asset after, for example, 5 years, but at a variable price or at the fair value of that product or thing or instrument. Sale of financial asset with the call or put option that is deeply out of money, means unfavorable option. For example, you are selling the asset with the option like you're going to $500,000 asset, you are going to buy it for $2,500,000. So it's a very unfavorable. No recourse factoring. So what is no recourse factoring? To explain this, I will be explaining what is recourse factoring. Entity guarantee to compensate the bank for the credit losses that are likely to occur. For example, a company have sold its receivable to bank for example, like $100,000 receivable for $90,000, but there's a term attached, recourse factoring. In recourse, if only $70,000 receivables are recovered, then there will be a $20,000 loss to the bank. So in recourse factoring, the entity is going to compensate the bank for the credit loss of $20,000 that are likely to occur. So if the entity is no recourse factoring, means entity is not going to compensate the bank for the credit losses, means all the risk and reward of the financial asset now belong to the other person. Now entity don't have, means these are the examples of all where risk and reward is being transferred. So to repeat them, these are 4 examples: unconditional sale of financial asset, sale of financial asset with the option to repurchase at the fair value at that time or variable price, sale of financial asset with the call or put option that is deeply out of money option, and 4th is no recourse factoring. If any of these examples meet in a sale transaction of financial asset, then financial asset should be derecognized and gain and loss should be recognized. Examples of where entity has retained substantially all the risk and reward. So these will be obviously opposite of that. First, sale and repurchase of transaction with the fixed price. Second, securities lending agreement, mortgage. In mortgage, usually you transfer your papers to the bank or the one who is providing the money, but the asset is not transferred to that person. It belongs to you. You are using it. You are consuming it. So it's mortgage arrangement. In risk reward is not transferred. Third, the sale of financial asset together with the total return swap that transfers the market rate exposure back to the entity. Means you are, for example, I am exchanging my machine A with the machine B. Now the return both will be getting, the owner of A and owner of B will be that whatever the return A generate and whatever the B return, they will be returned back to their original owner. So sale of financial asset together with a total return swap. means the total return swap is going to back to the original owner. Transfer the market risk exposure back to the entity. So it's not because all the market risk exposure originally belongs to the owner, real owners. Fourth, sale of financial asset with the call or put option that is deeply in money. Deeply in money means a favorable term. And fifth is recourse factoring. The entity guarantee to compensate the bank for the credit losses that are likely to occur. Financial asset in these cases should not be derecognized. Any amount received is recognized as financial liability, because you are going to get a sum of money for this arrangement. So all the amount will be a financial liability, means a loan to you. Now, derecognition of financial liability. A financial liability should be derecognized when obligation is discharged, cancelled, or expired. Accounting treatment of derecognition. Difference between the carrying amount of asset and liability and the amount received and paid is recognized as gain or loss for the period. Difference between the carrying amount of asset or liability, the amount received and paid. In any of the, if it's a financial asset or it's a financial liability, and actually we are discussing financial liability. So the carrying amount of liability minus the amount received or paid will be the gain or loss. Now, accounting treatment of derecognition. For example, other point is financial assets that are measured as fair value through OCI. The cumulative gain and loss recognized in OCI are not reclassified to P&L on disposal, whereas financial asset investment in debts measured at fair value through OCI, cumulative gain and loss recognized in OCI reclassified to profit and loss on disposal. The impairment of financial assets and the scope of this topic, impairment of financial assets. Firstly, I will be revising one important concept of financial asset, that is, the financial asset could be investment in debts, investment in shares, derivatives, and other include receivable, lease receivable, financial guarantee contracts, and loan below market rate of interest. So first is financial asset, investment in debts. Investment in debts is measured using two methods, fair value and amortized cost method. In fair value, there is P&L, measured through P&L and OCI. So, or investment in shares measured through fair value, P&L and OCI. Derivative is fair value through P&L. So the scope of the standard is financial asset, investment in debts measured at amortized cost method, and fair value through other comprehensive income. And others, lease receivable, financial guarantee contract, loan below market rate of interest. Why? Because fair value measured through P&L is automatically adjusted for the fair value changes, but the financial asset, investment in debts measured at amortized cost method and fair value through OCI are not on fair value, so they have to be impaired if there is an indicator or regularly check for impairment. And others like receivable, lease receivable, financial guarantee contracts, and loan below the market rate of interest. So there are some of the definitions I will be discussing with you. If the credit risk on the financial asset has not increased significantly since the initial recognition, the loss allowance should be equal to 12-month expected credit loss. If the credit loss on the financial asset has increased significantly since the initial recognition, then the loss allowance should be equal to lifetime expected credit loss. Adjustment to the loss allowance are charged or credit to statement of profit and loss unless credit impaired interest income is recognized on assets gross amount excluding the loss allowance. So some of the definition I will be discussing is credit loss. Credit loss is the present value of the difference between the contractual cash flow and the cash flow entity expects to receive. The difference between the contractual cash flow due to an entity and the cash flow expected to receive discounted present value of shortfall. Second is expected credit losses, the weighted average credit losses. Third, lifetime expected credit losses, the expected losses that result from all possible default events. Lifetime expected losses, the expected credit losses that result from all possible default events, means more severe or in high intensity. And 12-month expected credit losses is the proportion of lifetime expected losses that result from events that might occur 12 months after the reporting day. These are less severe losses. And other term is past due. Past due, a financial asset is past due when a counterparty has failed to make a payment when the payment was contractually due. So the indicators of credit impairment. First is financial difficulties of issuer or the borrower. Second, breach of a contract. Third, borrower is being granted concessions. Fourth, it is becoming probable that the borrower will enter bankruptcy. There are some impairment stages. There are 3 impairment stages. First stage is credit quality not significantly reduces since inception, means a 12-month expected credit loss will be recognized. Second, credit quality reduced significantly since inception, lifetime expected credit loss will be recognized. And third, objective evidence found, lifetime losses will be recognized. Next topic is significant increase in credit risk. To assess where there has been a significant increase in credit risk, IFRS 9 requires entity to compare the asset risk of default at the reporting date with its risk of default at the initial recognition. Means risk of default at the initial recognition and risk of default at the reporting date. Entity should not solely rely on the past information when determining the credit risk has increased significantly. An entity can assume that credit risk has not increased significantly if the instrument has a low credit risk at the reporting date. Credit risk can be assumed to have increased significantly if the contractual payments are more than 30 days overdue at the reporting date. Now, the next is measuring the expected losses. An entity estimate of expected losses should be unbiased and probability weighted. Second, reflect of the time value of money. And third, based on the information about past event, current condition and forecast of future economic condition. If an asset is credit impaired at the reporting date, IFRS 9 says that the expected credit losses should be made as a difference between the asset's gross carrying amount and the present value of estimated future cash flow when discounted at the original effective interest. IFRS 9 says that the following event may suggest that asset is credit impaired: financial difficulty of issuer or borrower, breach of a contract such as default, borrower is being granted concessions, and it is probable the borrower will enter bankruptcy. If an asset is credit impaired, interest income is calculated on asset's net carrying amount, that is the gross carrying amount less the loss allowance. Now, trade receivable, no financing element. Okay, remember this point. For trade receivable that do not have financing element, long-term receivable loss allowance is measured at lifetime expected credit loss from initial recognition. So there are two types of loss allowance that will be recognized. A loss allowance since initial recognition. Stage 3, objective evidence. For loss allowance since initial recognition, lifetime expected credit loss will be recognized, allowance for doubtful debts. And for stage 3, objective evidence, actual bad debts will be recognized. Purchase or originated credit impair financial assets. A purchase or originated credit impaired financial asset is the one that is credit impaired on initial recognition. Interest income is calculated on such asset using credit adjusted effective interest rate. Credit adjusted effective interest rate. The credit adjusted effective interest rate incorporate all the contractual terms of the financial asset as well as expected credit loss. In other words, the higher the expected credit loss, the lower the credit adjusted effective interest will be. Since credit losses anticipated at the inception will be recognized through a credit adjusted effective interest rate, loss allowance on the purchase or originated credit impaired financial assets should be measured only as a change in the lifetime expected credit losses since the initial recognition. Higher the expected credit losses, lower the credit adjusted effective interest rate. Aspects of impairment of financial asset is in investment in debts, means you are given a loan to someone below the market rate of interest. Loan given to market rate of interest is usually to employees and below the market, then from start a loss will be recognized. Then debt instrument, moving to the next topic, is debt instrument measured at fair value through OCI. Loss allowance will not reduce the carrying amount of asset in balance sheet. Instead, loss allowance is recognized against OCI, other comprehensive income. These assets that are held at fair value at the reporting date, and therefore a loss allowance should not reduce the carrying amount of the asset in the statement of financial position. Instead, a loss allowance is recorded against other comprehensive income. It means investment in debt instrument measured at fair value through OCI. Then in the case of impairment, their carrying amount in the balance sheet should not be reduced. Instead, allowance is recorded against the other comprehensive income. It's shown in other comprehensive income. And lease receivable and trade receivable financing element. Lease receivable and trade receivable having financing element. Entity can choose at its accounting policy to measure loss allowance at an amount equal to lifetime expected credit loss. Now, simplification. IFRS 9 permits some simplification. The loss allowance should always be measured at an amount equal to lifetime expected. The loss allowance should always be measured at an amount equal to lifetime credit losses for trade receivable and contract asset recognized in accordance with IFRS 5 revenue from contract with customer if they do not have a significant financing component. For lease receivable as well as trade receivable and contract asset with significant financing component, the entity can choose its accounting policy to measure the loss allowance at an amount equal to lifetime credit losses. Reversal. At each reporting day, the loss allowance is recalculated. It may be that the allowance was previously equal to lifetime credit losses, but now due to reduction in the credit risk only need to be equal to 12-month expected credit losses. As such, there may be a substantial reduction in the allowance required. Gain or loss on the remeasurement of loss allowance are recorded in profit and loss. So double entry will be loss allowance debit, P&L credit. Now financial guarantee contract. It is a financial liability. Financial guarantee contract, it's a financial liability measured initially at the fair value of any premium received less any transaction cost. Fair value of premium received less any transaction cost. Subsequently, premium is amortized as income over the period. Initially, what will be the double entry? Double entry will be bank debit, deferred income credit, because you are receiving an amount for the premium, and at the year end the double entry will be deferred income debit, P&L credit. Now you are recognizing the deferred income at the year end. However, if at the year end the expected payment payable on the guarantee exceed the liability, then the liability is increased to this amount. So this is near end of this derivative accounting, but next podcast will be based on hedge accounting.